Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we've got a great episode continuing from topics of yesterday. We spoke a little bit about the Industrial 4.0 or the fourth revolution or the information age, however you want to define it, as many define it very differently. It all comes down to the fourth industrial revolution and how that is playing a very impactful role specifically on how we manufacture goods today around the world. And today's topic as a continuation is we're going to go one level deeper on manufacturing, speaking more about leading in from manufacturing, into supply chains, into logistics, and how have those changed here in 2020, but more importantly, how have those or will those change in the next 10 years, right? We've talked a lot here on VCTV about how 2020 is a foundational year for this next decade. And our supply chains have changed very drastically, as our guests will be sharing with us just in a few moments. Logistics, we've got some really cool stuff happening on the logistics side and want to be able to discuss that and also make sure that you as investors and entrepreneurs know where to put your time and money appropriately. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's a pleasure to have you today. If you like what you're hearing, audience, make sure you click that subscribe button and tune in for more VCTV as we host multiple episodes every day of the week. Also, if you'd like to be on a show like today, like fellow investors, not only get the chance to meet with them, but share your thoughts and insights around industries, topics, and regions around the world, do reach out. We'd love to find the right set for you and entrepreneurs. You've got less than 45 days left in the 2020 here. We've got a virtual stage for you to get up on and start pitching your company, product, or service for this next year, and getting a chance to do that with us here as investors, get real-time feedback, and get exposure to our live audience as well. Definitely reach out to the team and or myself. We'd love to find the right spot for you. And a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and Maria for making VCTV possible every single day. With that, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. Let's go ahead and get into introductions, introducing some of our guest investors today who are coming from around the world to share with us their thoughts and insights around how all of this is changing. Keith, let's kick it off with you today.
Hey, Kyle, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, buddy?
Great.
Little intro, little background.
Yeah, well, I've been in venture capital for 20 years, focused on mostly what we call clean tech. Earlier this year, though, I split off from Pangea Ventures and I formed a new group called Upper Stage Ventures. And our focus is supply chain. We are investing into manufacturing, food and agriculture, fintech, blockchain, anything that can impact and improve problems that are systemic in the supply chains. I would say that I already had this idea at the end of last year. And as I watched supply chain dramas unfold under COVID lockdown earlier this year, I became more and more convinced that this is an area where investment is needed and surprisingly few people are playing. So there are a lot of opportunities.
And I want to hear in just a minute why that is, because I feel like I know, but also I think the audience should hear as to why this is kind of an unkept secret for most investors and why it's actually a huge area of opportunity that people should be focusing on. So stay tuned, Keith. I know you're taking notes, so make sure to note that when we're coming back to. Solomon, welcome to the show as well. It's a pleasure to have you. A little intro and a little background as well, please. Oh, you're on mute. But it was a wonderful introduction. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. We can move on. I can actually say today that I, long-time listener, first-time panelist. So this is my first time here. So if I do something inappropriate, please let me know so that I can be less raw and more reserved. But anyway, I got into supply chain and in particular logistics around 1992. I apologize. 1992 timeframe where, and that was because I was hired by a startup to optimize their logistics system. The company was Fleet Advisor. Actually, the company's name was Microflex, and the product was Fleet Advisor. It was later acquired by Eaton. And of all the places in the world, this was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So imagine that in the 90s, there were startups in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, of all places. So that's what got me interested in logistics and ultimately optimization. And I've kind of continued in that general area. And as things have evolved, it has been very interesting. But we were the first company first product to track individual packages for UPS and FedEx. So what you sign now for UPS and FedEx is a evolution of what we started. We were tracking at that time pallets, not individual packages. Now we can track individual packages, and our job was really to track and optimize things. And we found all kinds of interesting things about truck drivers. And one of the reasons we were successful is that we took the keyboard and we made it an alphabetical ABC keyboard, because most truck drivers did not have typewriters or keyboards. So they were not able to do QWERTY keyboards like most of our competitors. And we were also the first in satellite communications for trucking fleets. So that's what brings me here.
Wow. Well, welcome. That's outstanding history. This is going to be a very fun, exciting conversation as well. And I know we have one other guest who'll be joining us here in just a few minutes, as there's a little bit of technical difficulties. But nonetheless, guys, everyone, welcome very much to the show today. A pleasure to have each and every one of you here. And just to go ahead and get started, I mean, let's talk about the current state of supply chains and logistics. Keith, we've had some conversations offline about this. Solomon, you've been into this since '92. I am calling that out. Usually I wouldn't, but you did. So I mean, that's a good time frame to see so much change. So Keith, let's start with you, and then Solomon, I want to come to you to follow up. What is the current state? What's happening? What has not happened, or what has happening here in 2020 around supply chain and logistics? What's changing, and as the current state of these industries?
Well, I would say that the most obvious thing that probably everyone saw headlines from earlier this year was when China did a complete lockdown. We saw how dependent the majority of supply chains were on China. Once China removed all suppliers from the equation, even though it didn't last that long, it compared to the other problems we've been having in 2020, the problems just rippled out everywhere, and you couldn't get raw material inputs. You couldn't get subcomponents anymore. Things that are in the food supply chain also just rippled out from there, and people became aware, perhaps for the first times, that their primary suppliers and their secondary suppliers were often being supplied by by the same sources for the raw materials, and then both primary and secondary suppliers went down. This became a problem everywhere, and so transparency throughout the supply chain, it became clear that it just was not there to the extent that people had thought that it was. So I think there are a lot of opportunities coming out of that now. I had a fantastic pitch last week from a fintech player that's come up with a new way to do transparency throughout the supply chain. We've certainly seen a lot of work going on in blockchain and in other secure tech approaches that provide more information on provenance going on throughout the supply chain. I think there are tremendous opportunities there. But even just going to local manufacturers, again, we're seeing a lot of, I'm seeing great opportunities for local manufacturers that could be addressing larger markets and have not had the vision or ambition to do so. We can plug them into a global supply chain.
Which is outstanding, being able to take that local to global effect very quickly for so many. That's huge and transformative. Coming back to you in just a minute on a few of those. Solomon, current state, what are you seeing this year? Before we get into the history, what are you seeing this year as changing in supply chains and logistics, furthering Keith's point?
So the one thing that I'm seeing is increasing automation at all levels. And that's kind of one word that describes, to kind of key off Keith's points, just the idea of having an ability to quickly switch people in the supply chain or organization within the supply chain and automating that. whether it is by having fault tolerant systems. So it's almost, you can map that to an electric circuit where you can have different alternative paths. So you can basically use that analogy. The last mile delivery is still continues to be one of the major challenges in terms of cost benefit kind of approach, that very few organizations or companies want to do that. And finally, just the whole kind of idea of having automated driving and cars and trucks and so on, whether it is food delivery or whether it is larger packages or whether it is national networks. That's kind of like in the background. So, I would say that in a few years, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, most of the trucks in United States at least would be driverless. And that is going to bring very interesting innovation to the whole field, because now you don't have the limits of, you can only drive 13 hours or whatever the regulations are in a particular country. And trucks can keep on going as long as they are fueled. And that fuel can be electric. So then question is that how do they pack enough energy, and how do they recharge, and whether, you just swap out batteries like you swap out propane tanks. So there are lots and lots of things that are going to come in this general umbrella of what I would say automation. I am not personally chasing the COVID kind of side effects, but I am using them to kind of give me an idea of where there are weaknesses in the system where they can be plugged in. So it doesn't have to be that the supply chain breaks down due to COVID. The supply chain can break down due to some international dispute between US and China, for example. So all these, regardless of how it is, I think the solution and the ultimate approach should be really the same, is that how do we quickly fix it without anyone suffering or paying the price?
Well, I think that's a great point, right? COVID just in 2020 here showed us how vulnerable, as we've heard many times, supply chains really are, and how they need to be built into the future here with huge amounts of flexibility and preparedness. Because once those things went down, it was a scramble for many. Instead, now you have to be flexible, you have to be ready, and you have to have processes in place, and you have to leverage technology, as even Keith was mentioning from the fintech side, is you've really got to be looking at other pieces of that puzzle. And in some cases, if you can, look at a very dispersed supply chain versus all in-house as well, which changes the game a little bit. And Solomon, I want to come back to you real quick on that point. Is looking back over your historic career, what what have you seen as some of the most dramatic changes from the early 90s to where we are today around supply chains, around logistics, for those that may be looking to get into this industry, and knowing a little bit of the history to come back to what should be put forward?
Well, when I started, we used to use dinosaurs to kind of move packages around. And historically, that wasn't working out very well for us.
T-Rex was the last mile delivery, right? Just a few steps here there. All right, I got you.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, when this, the prehistoric COVID hit, all the dinosaurs disappeared, and we had to find an alternative. And now we are back to COVID-19 and something similar happening. So there's a lot I learned from the age of dinosaurs that, is very relevant here. But just in the last few years, not to go into the history lesson, you can see Flintstones for the history lesson. That's a good show if you want to kind of see the historic logistics, how people moved and how things moved during that time. But again, I'm dating myself with Flintstones. Coming back to Kyle, your point, with a very long-winded historical lesson, the main thing that has changed, in my opinion, is the expectation and the volume. The volume that is going through logistics is huge. And you can hold Amazon and just responsible for it, and all the copycats that have come after Amazon. And most people, especially during COVID times, are even doing grocery shopping at home. I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people are. And for non-grocery shopping or non-perishable shopping, that is almost like, I don't know what the latest statistics are, but just the volume that is moving through the system is huge. So you can kind of think of it, that we have like a little village that used to kind of like, do things on an ad hoc basis where, a package would flow and so on. And now we have to kind of do it in a mass thing where without automation, we can't do it. So just to kind of give you an idea, in 90s, there was no tracking of packages involved. When you gave a package to UPS, somebody would try to figure out how to get it from point A to point B. So the first thing that happened was, well, how do we optimally get it? And then we came up with this hub and spoke system that was around 90s that, how do we alternatively do that? And how do we do multiple hubs? So you can look at the airline system for that example, is that, if you're flying on United, for example, from North Carolina to San Francisco, there are a number of hubs, Chicago, Denver, and so on, Newark, that United can route you through. It's a very similar system for packages now. And whatever used to be done manually now needs to really be automated, that as soon as you drop off the package, that package now knows how it's going to get to the final destination.
Now, step forward, Keith, you saw the area of opportunity here and said, why are people not paying attention to it, and decided to go all in? I mean, what was that moment? What was that trigger for you that just said, this is the opportunity I have to be a part of, and this is the opportunity, as you've said previously, I have to invest into now because this is a now market versus a future market?
Well, the trigger for this was not so much supply chain, but I'll tell the story briefly. I was helping out my buddy Frank was running a display materials company. Really impressive stuff, fantastic. And there are supply chain issues around that also to do with China, which is a whole different story. But the work that I did there was to refocus that company on market opportunity rather than to be focused on technology. And as we saw that what we could do in the markets there would expand the e-ink market from $1 billion a year to $7 billion a year just through three advantages its technology had, we were able to completely reframe the company around that expanding market opportunity. And then we sold the company in about 3 months. It was a great transaction for all the shareholders. Frank and I started brainstorming about that and said, there are a lot of companies like this that have something extraordinary for which there is an international market, yet they lack the vision or ambition to go after those markets. Could we buy one of these and run it ourselves? So then I began to look at companies. I looked at about 200 Vancouver area companies because we were in lockdown. I couldn't get on airplanes. I really just wanted to diligence local companies. And I saw this pattern over and over again where there was a lack of support from their existing cap table. There was a lack of vision to take their products or services out to a larger and more compelling market. And generally, there was a satisfaction to just remain a lifestyle business. A lot of these were in the areas impacting supply chain, which was something that I had been excited about for a long time, and increasingly so over the course of 2019. I had been thinking there's more and more to do in this space. So I proposed to Frank, hey, why don't we do this as a fund? Now, since then, our thinking has evolved more. We might not even ever have to do a fund because we're able to put together these special purpose vehicles very quickly as we identify opportunities. There are so many high net worth and family office investors that are really interested in this space. A lot of them come from operating backgrounds. They know the pain points that we find companies that address those pain points, and they also know our background and our network and how we're able to take those companies out internationally.
And so with that being said, I mean, now let's step forward. So looking at the year ahead and really, again, this decade, as we've spoken so many times about, where are those areas of opportunity that people should be focusing on? I mean, Solomon, you talked about North Carolina, this huge area of center of logistics and supply chains that no one knew about in the 90s. And now all of a sudden, here we are today as seeing the technology that you and your team built being the heartbeat of this industry. looking forward, where are those areas of opportunity that people should be paying attention to if they're looking to start investing or start building through the entire, and we'll include logistics in this, through the entire value chain from end to end, from manufacturing all the way through it gets to our door?
So the way I kind of see things is that in terms of the evolution of this world, particularly with kind of changes in the US leadership, there is going to be more globalization that's going to take place in US. And regardless of where your politics is on that, there's going to be more opportunities for international collaboration that are new gateways opening up. So whenever there are opportunities in innovation or entrepreneurship, they usually come with changes in the environment. So I had mentioned automation. I think another opportunity that we can grab onto is the whole idea of globalization. Whether we like it or not, there are some things we can do better, and there are some things other countries can do better. And within even our country, there are some things different areas can do better. So when I was interviewing at Duke, one of the things I was asked is that, what would it take for you to create a Silicon Valley here? And I was like, why would you need a Silicon Valley here? Because there is already a Silicon Valley there. You kind of figure out what your core strengths are. It's a lower cost of living. It is, you have better access to talent. You don't necessarily need the VCs here. You need access to the VCs, or you need access to the investors. So I believe there are going to be a lot of opportunities in terms of cross-country and cross-regional collaborations that are going to come up in just the overall area of logistics and value chain in particular, is where people are going to start saying, rather than for us to own the whole pie, let's focus on what we can really do well and where we can really add value. So if you think about it, there are things that we already do. We hire babysitting services. We have, as human beings, we have kind of put a dollar value to almost everything that we do. Takeout food, cooking, meal planning. All this stuff is kind of examples of things that we do in our life that are value chain, principle-based, and logistics-based.
Absolutely. Keith, to you, same question.
Well, I share Salman's enthusiasm for opportunities in logistics. Just going back to his point earlier around autonomous vehicles, that's very exciting. And there are several bottlenecks that are slowing that down. So opportunities for technology investing in that space. So certainly a friend of mine, Alexei Andreev, runs a fund now exclusively investing in this space for autonomous vehicles and solving these kind of problems, AI to interpret LiDAR signals, etc. Just a lot of opportunities there to improve things, and it's moving faster than most people anticipate. And maybe for discussion on one of our impact panels sometime is, what are we going to do with all these truckers when they're out of work? We're going to see displacement to a large extent throughout that and some other industries. I would expect to see that technology roll out in the same way that we saw increased automation and in improvements in electric vehicles in the warehousing industry. And this goes back an investment that we made when I was at Mitsubishi Corporation like 20 years ago around converting the battery-powered lift trucks in the warehouses to hydrogen fuel cells. This is one of the spaces where hydrogen fuel cells absolutely made sense, because if you didn't have a battery that had a discharge curve, you just had steady power output, you could run the lift truck at full capacity for the entire shift and then quickly recharge. Now, batteries now still have this kind of a discharge curve, but it is better. And we are seeing technologies now, battery technologies, where we're seeing discharge curve that stays flat for longer and then has a sharper drop off as opposed to a linear curve. This is much better for warehousing applications. We watched those technologies get rolled out in a kind of exponential way, where there was a very long qualification period, and then it hit a knee in the curve, and the economics of it were proven, and we saw it adopted over the next decade that followed. I think we're going to see the same thing in autonomous trucking. It will initially be onesie-twosies running on the road for a couple of years, but once they have the data in from that and they can see the savings, you're going to see an explosion of rollouts in that space. All those truckers, I hope they're taking some night school courses or something, figuring out what they're going to do next.
Well, and that's a good conversation, as you said, for our impact panel, but also just kind of talking about the future of this industry and how that will transform some of those positions to potentially other areas within the same value chain. Solomon, I want to come back to you on a similar point. You mentioned last mile delivery, and you said there were still challenges around last mile delivery, and some of that might have been around costs. Tell us a little bit more about why last mile delivery may still be challenging for some companies, as it seems like a no-brainer. I mean, getting from point A to point B should be quick and easy, but it does seem like it's still a barrier at some point.
Yeah, so the main challenge there is that the ticket value that you have per item and the number of items you have are not easy to scale. So I'm advising a company called eBox Chain, and they basically focus on local restaurant and grocery store delivery. And the challenge that they have, that any company has, and that is that unlike you have a truck moving thousands of packages, they have a car moving a very few packages. And people are willing to pay a lot of money to transport themselves, but they're not willing to pay that much money to transport their things. So if I order food from a restaurant, I don't want to pay more than a couple of bucks. And even those couple of bucks are a grudge couple of bucks that I give. So for example, if I order from Costco, and the price that I pay for delivery for Costco is just, very minuscule, but it is not something that I like paying, I enjoy paying. I say I might as well go there and like pick up stuff myself, right? But when I order stuff from Amazon, it's kind of like I don't have that alternative option. So it is kind of already blended in. I can't go to an Amazon warehouse to do that. So that's kind of one challenge. The other challenge that comes in here is that the food delivery is very much a day part thing, which is kind of like a bulk of this thing. People order at lunch and dinner, but what does your driver do between lunch and dinner besides have lunch and dinner themselves? So this is the kind of thing that I think comes up where you have a very good use for a resource for, let's say, 4 hours a day. What do they do on the other 4 hours? Because they can't really have another job with delivering at lunch in particular. They can have another job if they are delivering at dinner. And I think, coming back to Keith, there are going to be unemployed truck drivers. How do we kind of bring that into the picture? Maybe there is a solution there. So I feel a lot of things in innovation ultimately are about identifying patterns and seeing how we can pull some strength or some opportunity from one area to solve a problem in another area. So maybe there is an opportunity there. I also wanted to share something that kind of struck me when Keith was talking about battery lives. That was new information to me. I thought battery was battery. It's steady. But that kind of brings a very interesting point. Is that how do you kind of, as the battery technology changes, how do you adapt to different lifestyles and different things? And particularly when this comes to like driverless trucks. How do we, maybe it's about swapping out batteries, maybe, having stations that can do that particularly. So if you can imagine like NASCAR racing or some of the racing where you have a pit stop and, they immediately get in and get out, the timing can be pretty much very important in this whole thing. So I don't know if I answered your question or just rambled,
No.
but happy to kind of for you to dig deeper in any of these things.
You did it. You did a great job. I mean, you explained a very big issue. And last mile in general has been something that we've been talking about for the past 5 years, if not much longer. But for the past 5 years, it's really been a topic of conversation around technology. And more importantly, it started around mobility and getting from point A to point B, or B to C, if you will, in a short form manner, right? We talked about scooters, we had bikes, we had this whole revolution of these, methods of transportation for us as individuals, but we didn't really always talk about how logistics and supply chains played a role in this. And now, come full circle to your point, this is something that's more important. And if we also look at the idea of going hyper local, as Keith mentioned, bringing those local supply chains into a big global picture, that's where last mile starts to become relevant again. And I think you brought up a great point. And Keith, I don't know if you have anything else to add on. I mean, again, around last mile delivery, why there may be some challenges, or also where there's some opportunities, because again, going from global to local to hyper local, and then blending all of that in, that there could be a huge opportunity somewhere in there.
Oh, for sure there are. So if I can just maybe marry up a couple of topics we talked about here, that battery discharge curve, it becomes really important if you're talking about last mile delivery with drones. Because as the batteries discharge, the batteries become less and less powerful. There's a high risk of drones just dying on somebody's doorstep. Not only do they get their Amazon package or their pizza or whatever it is, but we got a drone too. You can't have that. So when I was at Pangea, we had an investment in the battery space, and that company was working with a lot of these big Silicon Valley firms that were focused on and continue to be focused on delivery, and that last mile aspect is really concerning for them. And the specific focus they wanted was to get that battery discharge curve to remain close to full power as long as possible, and then have you're of necessity, you'll have a rapid drop off at the end of that. Now, if you can get to something closer to a flat curve, you can have software that detects when you've dropped below a certain point and tell the drone to return to home. That can solve the problems, but we're still seeing, we still haven't seen the rollout even in small markets like Mountain View, for example, where some things have been tried. We still haven't seen rollout to the level that I think people anticipated, and a lot of that has to do with physical properties on batteries.
Interesting. So when do you think that is something that we may see? Is that something short, long? Where do you see that kind of shifting so that we can see that kind of rollout happen?
Well, batteries, lithium-ion batteries, have quite a predictable rate of improvement every year. We've seen quite steady improvement over the last couple of decades. 20 years ago, when I started investing in clean tech, we were saying, "Oh, there's no way lithium-ion batteries are at their limit, and we're never going to be able to do what they need to do." But they just keep creeping a little bit better every year. I do anticipate somewhere in the next 5 years, we're going to have strong enough battery performance to have rollout in high density population centers. That will make sense. But we're going to need new battery technologies somewhere in the next decade or so if we're going to get beyond high density areas.
Got it. And gentlemen, I want to come to you both for closing thoughts here. We've had a great conversation. I know there's so much more to talk about, but I want to give you both the opportunity to throw out anything else out there as closing thoughts, and then we'll come back as to where everyone can find you to continue the conversation. So Solomon, let's start with you. I mean, closing thoughts around the future of supply chains and logistics, maybe any advice you have for those that are investing or building in the space as well.
Definitely. So, I feel automation and changes to our lifestyle is a major issue. So we didn't really talk about the aging population, for example, that's going to increase the need for home delivery. So if you really think about it, almost everything is like Keith's battery curve, right? The things change. We have the age or the mobility going down, actually age going up, but mobility of people going down over time. So the way to kind of look for opportunities is to really look for changes that are going to come before they actually get here. So I see kind of my, the way I look for deal flow is one of the, I think it was Reid Hoffman or something like that. I heard him say that, you don't look for deal flow in the river. You look for deal flow up in terms of the sky and see when the rain is coming or whenever the weather is changing, and then just get ahead of it. So it's very much kind of like that. So look ahead and try to kind of get ideas that work from one area, that solve problems in one area, and use it in other areas. I think those are the two main things from investing as well as from innovation perspective. And to me, both are really the same. In investing, you are investing dollars. In founding companies, you are investing your time, and they are both investments. In fact, the time investment is actually more critical as you at least as you grow older.
Absolutely. And where can everyone find you online if they want to continue the conversation, whether that be your company or LinkedIn, et cetera?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm Salman Azhar, my full name. And my email is dsazhar. The D is kind of made up because S Azhar was taken. So I guess you can say Dr. S Azhar. So dsazhar@gmail.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. Either way works, and happy to talk to you. I'm focusing more and more on women and BIPOC or people of color these days, because I feel there's a huge opportunity for us to help them and open avenues that are not open for them, or facilitate them coming in and just increasing our ability to create and make our lives better.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you, Solomon. And I love that you made up a middle initial just to separate yourself from the crowd. That's phenomenal. So there you go. Anyone that's looking for a great advisor or investor, Solomon's got some tricks up his sleeves. Definitely can help you. But another great investor and potential advisor or partner for you as well. Last but not least, Keith, closing thoughts as well. And then also, where can everyone find you online to continue the conversation?
Yeah, thanks. I want to just emphasize that point that Salman made about looking ahead for deal flow. So many of the best opportunities that I've invested in over my career, I first saw years before I actually invested, and was able to help those companies along the way. As a good example in the supply chain area is Hazel Technologies. The first time I looked at it, they were just students still at Northwestern University or just out of, and they had this great idea, but it was a bit unproven, and the team was definitely unproven. Fast forward a few years later, and they had gone commercial in apples. Now, just to summarize what they do, they protect produce as well as meat and other products. They have multiple formulations that protect this and creates a long, stable shelf life, multiple times longer than how these things would stay fresh in the current system with cold chain, etc. So it greatly simplifies supply chain and puts economic power back in the hands of growers and packers. But it took years for this to develop, and along the way, we were able to provide some advice, able to connect them with people, etc., so that when they were ready, we were top of mind to them as a value-add investor, and the rest of their existing investors already knew what we could bring to the table besides money. And I always say the money is the easiest part of this game. It's the hard work that you have to do to make these companies successful, keep the right management team in place, find the right business model. That stuff is much harder than the money. So I'm very excited to watch what they're doing. Hazel Technologies, fantastic company. As for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I also had to throw a middle initial into my Twitter handle, but I think that's because I just forgot my password from my original Twitter account. But you can find me at Keith A. Gillard on there. And my new firm is upperstage.ventures, a very stealthy website, but you can see our beautiful logo.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for all the thoughts and insights. And I'm trying not to laugh because you both made up middle initials, but nonetheless, again, to the audience, if you're looking for great individuals to work with, these guys have not only the knowledge, the experience, but also the tricks to help you stand out above the crowd and your competition as well. But Solomon, Keith, again, thank you so much for your time, and audience, for you as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe. Do give us a thumbs up as well. If you'd like to be on a show like today with Solomon and Keith or other investors, thank you, Solomon. Do reach out. We'd love to find the right set of investors. Thank you, Keith, and or topic for you to speak on as well. And entrepreneurs, as I said before, there's 45 days left, a little less in the year. Come join us here on VCTV. Jump up on the virtual stage, pitch us as investors to get real-time feedback on your company, product, or service, along with building foundational relationships with us as investors and getting exposure to our live audience as well. Reach out to the team and or myself. We'd love to find the right spot for you. And a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and Maria for making VCTV possible every single day. Solomon, Keith, have a wonderful day. Everyone, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find all of us online 24/7, 365, middle initial or not, we're all there. And with that being said, everyone have a great day. We'll be back here with